There's something you need to know. Your church taught you about salvation, about grace, about loving your neighbor. Those are essential truths. But there's an entire body of scripture your pastor probably never unpacked from the pulpit. A section of the Bible written specifically about money, about wealth, about how to build it, how to keep it, how to multiply it across generations. It's sitting right there in Proverbs. 31 chapters of pure financial instruction from the wisest man who ever lived, Solomon. And most churches skip over it entirely, not because it's wrong, because it threatens the financial dependency they've created. I spent 40 years studying these chapters, 40 years finding the laws God embedded in them, laws so precise, so repeatable, so verifiable that they work whether you believe in them or not, like gravity, like physics. These are the financial laws that actually govern how wealth works. And I'm going to expose all 11 of them today. The first law is what I call the law of intentional accumulation. It's hidden in Proverbs 13:11. Wealth gotten by vanity shall be diminished, but he that gathereth by labor shall increase. Notice the word gathereth, not earns, not makes, gathereth. There's a difference. Earning is passive. Money comes to you through work. But gathering is active. It requires intention. It requires capturing what's earned and consolidating it. Most people earn their whole life, but never gather. Money flows through their hands. They make $100 and spend $100. They make $200 and spend $200. They never gather. They never accumulate. They never consolidate. But the law says the gatherer increases. The one who intentionally accumulates multiplies. This is the difference between being paid and being wealthy. Your church told you to work hard. That's true. But they never told you to gather, to intentionally capture and consolidate. That's the first law. That's where wealth begins. Not in earning, in gathering, in saying no to consumption and yes to accumulation. The second law is what I call the law of proportional giving. It's in Proverbs 3, 9 and 10. Honor the Lord with thy substance, and with the first fruits of all thine increase. So shall thy barns be filled with plenty, and thy presses shall burst out with new wine. Your church taught you to tithe, to give 10%. But notice what Solomon actually says. He says give from the first fruits, the first portion, before taxes, before living expenses, before anything else. The first fruits are the best, the most sacred. And notice the condition. Honor the Lord with substance, not with words, not with feelings, with actual money, actual substance. When you give the first and best, the scripture promises your barns will be filled with plenty. Your increase will overflow. This isn't about being generous to the poor. This is about honoring God with wealth. And when you do, increase follows. Your church made giving an obligation. God made it a law. Proverbs 22:4 says, by humility and the fear of the Lord are riches, and honor, and life. Humility expressed through giving to God creates the conditions for riches to follow. That's a law, not advice, a law. The third law is what I call the law of deliberate counsel. It's in Proverbs 15:22. Without counsel plans fail, but in the multitude of counselors they are established. Most people make financial decisions in isolation. They think it through alone. They pray about it alone. They decide alone. Solomon says that's how plans fail. That's how decisions collapse. Instead, he says seek multiple counselors, not one advisor, multiple. Why? Because one person sees from one angle, two people see from two angles, multiple counselors see from many angles, blind spots disappear, biases get challenged, weak thinking gets exposed, strong thinking gets confirmed. Your church taught you to pray about your decisions. That's true. But Solomon says pray and then talk to counselors. Get multiple perspectives. Vet your thinking against other minds. When you do this, your plans become established. They become stable. They have foundation. This is why wealthy families have advisors, multiple advisors, tax advisors, legal advisors, financial advisors, investment advisors. They understand Solomon's law. Proverbs 20:18 confirms it. Every purpose is established by counsel, and with good advice, make war. War here means competition, business. Every successful endeavor requires counsel, multiple counsel. That's a law. The fourth law is what I call the law of preparation before crisis. It's in Proverbs 27:12. A prudent man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself, but the simple pass on and are punished. Foreseeth. The prudent man sees what's coming. He prepares in advance. He builds reserves before he needs them. He makes decisions now based on what he sees arriving. The simple man ignores the warning signs. He waits until crisis hits. Then he scrambles. Then he panics. Then he makes desperate decisions that cost him everything. This is the law that separates the wealthy from the broke. The wealthy prepare before crisis. They save before they need to. They build emergency funds. They diversify. They position themselves. The broke wait until disaster strikes. Then they're forced to sell assets, forced to go into debt, forced to make terrible decisions. Proverbs 21:5 says, "The thoughts of the diligent tend only to plenteousness, but of everyone that is hasty only to want." The diligent man thinks ahead. He plans. He prepares. He accumulates plenteousness. The hasty man reacts to circumstances. He creates want. This is a law. When you prepare before crisis, you prosper when crisis comes. When you don't prepare, crisis destroys you. The fifth law is what I call the law of wisdom's priority. It's in Proverbs 4:7. Wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore get wisdom, and with all thy getting, get understanding. Principle means first, most important, above all else. Solomon is saying, get wealth, yes, but get wisdom first. Get understanding first, because wealth without wisdom is temporary. It arrives and disappears. Wealth with wisdom is permanent. It compounds. It multiplies across generations. This is why lottery winners go broke. They got wealth but not wisdom. Wealth without wisdom is like putting a Ferrari in the hands of a drunk driver. It ends in disaster. But wisdom with wealth is unstoppable. Proverbs 29:3 says, "Whoso loveth wisdom rejoiceth his father, but he that keepeth company with harlots spendeth his substance." The man who loves wisdom prospers. The man who loves foolishness loses everything. Your church taught you to love God. That's right. But Solomon says specifically, love wisdom. Develop it. Pursue it. Make it your priority. Because with wisdom you build. Without it you destroy. This is a law. The sixth law is what I call the law of strategic debt avoidance. It's in Proverbs 22:7. The rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. This is absolute, not opinion. Law. When you borrow, you become a servant to the lender. That's not figurative. That's literal. Your money goes to them first. Your decisions are constrained by your obligation to them. Your future is mortgaged to their interests. This is why wealthy people avoid debt. They understand this law. They'd rather delay a purchase than become a servant to a lender. Proverbs 17:18 adds, "A man void of understanding striketh hands, and becometh surety in the presence of his friend." Shaking hands on debt is foolish. Becoming guarantor for someone else's debt is foolishness. Proverbs 27:12 continues the theme. "The wise layeth up knowledge, but the mouth of a fool is near destruction." The fool borrows because he can't wait. The wise saves because he understands the cost of servitude. Your church never taught this law. They didn't teach you to avoid debt. They taught you it was normal, necessary, part of life. Solomon teaches the opposite. Debt is servitude. Servitude is death. Avoid it at all costs. That's a law. The seventh law is what I call the law of labor's necessity. It's in Proverbs 10:4. "He becometh poor that dealeth with a slack hand, but the hand of the diligent maketh rich. Labor is not optional. Work is not optional. Effort is not optional. These are the foundation of wealth. Your church taught you to trust God for provision. That's true. But Solomon teaches that you must also work, provide the effort, do the labor, then trust God for the multiplication. Proverbs 12:27 says, "The slothful man roasteth not that which he took in hunting, but the substance of a diligent man is precious." The lazy man has opportunity, but doesn't work it. The diligent man takes what's available and makes something of it. Proverbs 14:23 confirms, "In all labor there is profit, but the talk of the lips tendeth only to penury." Labor creates profit. Talk creates poverty. This is a law. You cannot talk your way to wealth. You cannot pray your way to wealth. You must work. Provide effort. Be diligent. Your part is effort. God's part is multiplication. Both are necessary. That's a law. The eighth law is what I call the law of multiplied consultation before major decision. It's in Proverbs 24:3. "Through wisdom is an house builded, and by understanding it is established." Building requires wisdom. Establishing requires understanding. Before you make a major financial decision, you need both. You need wisdom about whether the decision aligns with principles. You need understanding about whether it makes sense practically. Both are required. Proverbs 11:14 says, "Where no counsel is, the people fall, but in the multitude of counselors there is safety." No counsel means the people fall. Multiple counsel means safety. Before you invest, before you start a business, before you make a major purchase, before you commit to a partnership, seek counsel, multiple counsel. Your church taught you to pray. That's right. But Solomon says pray and seek counsel, both together. That's a law. The ninth law is what I call the law of strategic generosity within boundaries. It's in Proverbs 11:24 and 25. "There is that scattereth, and yet increaseth, and there is that withholdeth more than is meet, but it tendeth to poverty. The liberal soul shall be made fat, and he that watereth shall be watered also." Notice the distinction. There's scattering that increases. There's withholding that creates poverty. Both are possible. The difference is intentionality. Strategic generosity increases. Fearful withholding creates poverty. Your church taught you to give. That's right. But they didn't teach you the law. The law says give strategically, give liberally, give in ways that help others prosper. And when you do, you prosper. But hoard out of fear? That creates poverty. This is why wealthy people are often generous. They understand this law. They know that strategic giving multiplies return. Proverbs 22:9 says, "He that hath a bountiful eye shall be blessed, for he giveth of his bread to the poor." The generous man is blessed, not because charity is virtuous, but because generosity is a law that produces multiplication. That's a law. The 10th law is what I call the law of asset diversification. It's in Proverbs 27:23. "Be thou diligent to know the state of thy flocks, and look well to thy herds." Know your assets. Watch them carefully. But earlier in Proverbs 27:12, Solomon implies you should have multiple types of assets. Flocks and herds are different. One is mobile, one grazes. When one fails, the other survives. This is diversification. Don't put everything in one place. Don't depend on one income stream. Don't trust one investment type. Spread your assets. Multiple income streams. Multiple investments. Multiple asset types. When one fails, others survive. When one thrives, others steady. This reduces risk and increases resilience. Proverbs 21:5 says, "The diligent man tends to increase." Why? Because he plans carefully. Part of planning is diversification. That's a law. The 11th law is what I call the law of generational wealth through teaching. It's in Proverbs 22:6. "Train up a child in the way he should go. and when he is old, he will not depart from it. This isn't about general parenting. This is specifically about teaching children about wealth, about money, about stewardship, about labor, about wisdom. When you teach a child how to handle money wisely, when you teach him the laws of wealth, when you teach her how to build assets, something happens. That training becomes part of who they are. When they're old, they don't depart from it. They continue applying those principles. Your grandchildren inherit not just money. They inherit principles. They inherit a way of thinking about wealth that compounds across generations. Your church never taught this. They never told you that teaching your children about money was spiritual training, that it was part of raising them in the way they should go. But Solomon makes it clear. Generational wealth isn't built in one generation. It's built across multiple generations through teaching. That's a law. Now let me tell you something crucial about these 11 laws. They're not suggestions. They're not nice ideas. They're laws, like gravity, like physics. They work whether you believe in them or not. A man can disbelieve gravity and step off a cliff. He'll still fall. He'll still die. The law doesn't care about his belief. Similarly, you can disbelieve these financial laws. You can violate them, but they'll still work. You'll still suffer the consequences. And conversely, you can apply them and prosper, whether you understand the theology or not. These are laws of creation, built into how the world works. Here's what your church should have taught you. These laws are not optional. They're foundational. Every wealthy person understands them, whether they know Scripture or not. Every broke person violates them, whether intentionally or through ignorance. The difference between generational wealth and generational poverty comes down to whether you understand and apply these 11 laws. Law number 1 says, gather intentionally. Not just earn, gather. Create a system where surplus is captured. Law number 2 says give from the first fruits strategically. It creates the conditions for multiplication. Law number 3 says seek counsel before major decisions. Multiple counsel, from multiple angles. Law number 4 says prepare before crisis arrives. The prepared prosper when disaster hits. Law number 5 says prioritize wisdom above all else. Wisdom makes wealth permanent. Law number 6 says avoid debt at almost any cost. Debt is servitude. Law number 7 says labor is necessary. Your effort matters. Law number 8 says consult before committing. Don't decide alone. Law number 9 says give generously within a strategy. Generosity multiplies return. Law number 10 says diversify your assets. Multiple streams, multiple types. Law number 11 says teach your children these laws. Pass them forward. Create generational wealth. Apply these 11 laws and watch what happens. You'll stop being broke. You'll start being wealthy. Not overnight. Not magically. Through application of law. Through understanding how God built wealth to work. Through aligning your financial life with how creation operates. Your church failed you. They taught you to give without teaching you to gather. They taught you to work without teaching you to diversify. They taught you to pray without teaching you to counsel. They taught you to be humble without teaching you to be strategic. But I'm telling you now, these are the laws. These are the rules. Apply them and prosper. Ignore them and struggle. It's that simple. It's that clear. It's that verifiable. You're at an age where applying these laws matters urgently. You have maybe 2 or 3 decades left. That's time to gather. That's time to build systems that continue after you're gone. That's time to teach your children. That's time to create generational wealth. But only if you understand and apply these 11 laws. Your church didn't teach them. I just did. The question is whether you'll apply them. The answer to your financial future depends on it.